Well, hello and welcome to this edition of the Kings of Summer podcast. I'm your host, Ken Steffes. That's right, it is Friday afternoon. Today, or the workday is over for most of us. And now it is time for us to do the things we like to do, the fun stuff, the stuff which makes life worth living. Just talk about sports, sports marketing, volleyball, whatever it is we want to talk about. And I have here a good friend and recurring guest, Greg Huffstutter, and I will introduce him in 1 second. But first, I'd like to welcome perhaps a new group of people to our podcast. Travis Merwarder, my co-author of the book, Kings of Summer, which you can get obviously anywhere books are sold, which is always Amazon, right? My co-author and host of Sandcast has offered to put some of my videos or some of these videos up on his Sandcast. Potentially. We will see. We will send this to him. And if that is the case, we welcome all you Sandcast listeners to what I think and we think will be an interesting discussions, maybe something, this is kind of what Travis is thinking about doing, expanding what they put on that platform, not necessarily specifically beach volleyball or an interview on a beach volleyball player, but more about the business of beach volleyball. So anyway, let me introduce Greg here. He has an unusual mix of sports marketing and writing in his background. In addition, back in the 1990s, during the AVP's heyday, when I was playing, he was an assistant coach for the men's and women's volleyball team at UC San Diego. He is a volleyball guy, so he knows volleyball. He spent several summers working the UCLA and Stanford camps with Al Skates and Don Shaw. Don Shaw's from the Palisades, P-Town. And he is an avid sand doubles player. That's beach, Greg. You know,
that is.
Don't be using those modern words. All right. After coaching, he worked 25 years in advertising and currently consults for Yamaha Motorsports and City of Hope. His focus, media planning, macroeconomic trends, and helping legacy brands adapt to the digital landscape. He's done projects for the San Diego Padres, Anaheim Angels, and Los Angeles Kings, as well as negotiating sports sponsorships for clients like McDonald's, Toyota, and Sizzler. Greg, what do you want to talk about today?
I would love to talk today about how big is beach volleyball, because that is a topic as a fan of your podcast. This topic keeps coming up over and over, where you've made the case that volleyball is smaller than most people think, and that you have accepted it. But the folks that sometimes say buy the AVP or make investments in the sport can't necessarily wrap their heads around. And so this was a particular interest of mine because in my marketing world, I have access to certain kinds of information and data that most normal folks, most business people don't have access to, because advertising agencies subscribe to certain research platforms that can be expensive, to be honest.
Yeah.
And so I actually have some great data to bring to this conversation. And
so it's not
let it go from there.
Your typical homeless Hermosa Beach volleyball player won't necessarily be able to cough up the cash to get this data.
Correct. One of the main data sources that we're going to talk about cost over $20,000 per year to subscribe.
Yeah.
So that's not the kind of research that most people have access to.
And that's good because that's one of the problems, right? You know, everyone uses Dr. Google or a business school Google and says, "Well, how big is this?" And they get all sorts of crazy numbers out of Google. I mean, if you Google how many volleyball fans are there worldwide, it'll say 900 million, which is a joke. I mean, it's not even close to reality. And it's the numbers they give for the United States are also way out of proportion, which is maybe why people have this impression that the sport is bigger than it is. And I'll add on to what Greg said. And when I say the sport's as big as it is, and it's not that big, and I would love it if it was as big as tennis or golf.
Yeah.
I would love it.
So would I.
Basketball. I would love it.
You have to be realistic
Exactly.
when you're making business decisions. And I think that's been probably a hurdle in the past, is people are operating with poor information.
Definitely, yeah, because then when you finally get to these numbers that we're talking about here, what Greg's going to show, hard numbers on what's happening, it paints a very different picture. And could it grow? Perhaps. I mean, the sport's been around a long time. People know it. I've discussed what they could possibly do to get more people interested. But let's hear from Greg. Go ahead. Let's fire it up.
All right. So let's see. I'm going to fire up presentation here. All right. How big is volleyball in the United States? So first, we just should start off by level setting. Well, how many people are there? And there are 258 million adults, 18 plus in the US. Obviously, you have kids that are interested in volleyball, but all the research sources are only allowed to measure adults. So we've tried to factor that in some of these numbers, but this is basically your base for America. And what we're going to do is come up with some concentric circles. So as you get closer and closer to your target audience, the numbers will get smaller and smaller. But the first number we're going to talk about would be just general volleyball awareness.
All right, what's going to be what do you think is going to be my first question that I would ask? Not we will probably get into it, but when I see this, there's something that goes on the side of me. It drives me insane, and I think I sent you a text on it. You want to tell them what it is?
Well,
or you want me to do it?
No, go ahead, jump in, because I can already see you getting twitchy.
There is no sport called volleyball. There is indoor volleyball and there is beach volleyball. And there are people who like both, but the assumption that people would like both of them, or would just, it seems more to me that people would like one or the other.
This is the highest level, and I have underneath it any level of interest in any kind of volleyball. So this could be someone who is just a casual fan. It could be a parent or a relative of a player. Someone who just watches volleyball every 4 years because it happens to be on the Olympics. It could even be someone who just likes a kid's post that talks about their club volleyball team, because the source of this information is Meta. Now, this is where this information comes from.
That's Facebook,
if you're an advertising,
that's Facebook.
Yes,
right?
If you're an advertising agency and you do any kind of ads on Facebook, Messenger, or Instagram, if you wanted to reach a volleyball general audience, this is how you would set it up. And there's all kinds of selects on the back end of Meta. And so I have job titles, a volleyball coach, an employer volleyball, an interest in FIVB or USA Volleyball, all the way down to just general interest in volleyball as a sport. This is 18 plus in the United States. And the range that Facebook gives you, if we wanted to advertise to anyone who knew anything about volleyball, is somewhere between 29 million and 34 million. Now, this doesn't get the junior high and high schoolers, but according to a different research source, Statista, there's approximately 564,000 high school volleyball players in the US. So based on that, we kind of rounded up to about 34 million. We took the high end of that to account for the junior high and high school players that would be part of that general volleyball awareness audience. Now, this is a pretty accurate number because Facebook and Instagram are so popular. About 2/3 of adults have a Facebook account and about half have an Instagram. There's obviously plenty of crossover, but that's a huge sample size for this type of number. So this is a pretty stable estimate, but it does not get to, well, at what level are you interested, and are you an actual player, and what kind of volleyball do you like, to your point. Mm-hmm. So in order to get down there, you have to look at other data sources. So the next one, as we're going down would be a casual volleyball player. So this is any kind of participant. Now we're down from 34 million. Now you're down to 7 million. So already we're down to less than 3% of the US population. But this could be someone who just bumps it around with friends in a backyard.
Yeah, like this is this the Statista from the
So
Statista
there's a
database
couple of
assessment?
different sources here. One is Statista, and this is typically what gets cited if you were to do a Chat GPT search or a Google search or a Grok search. Statista is usually what it sources. And I have to say, their description of where they get their research is extremely fuzzy. So if you go to Statista's website and say, where do you source your data? They'll say, well, it could be industry reports, market research, or surveys. And looking deeper, those customer surveys typically only have 1 to 5,000 respondents, which is not a very big sample size when you're talking about the United States. So their estimate was 6.9 million.
Yeah, but also we'll talk. I'm sure it's statistically significant. They got to go R squared, right? But one of the things I noted, and I'm sure this is where we're going, and what Greg said in the beginning is these circles are going to get smaller. The question asked, did you play volleyball at least once during the last year? Okay.
Yes.
So if
we're going to keep going down
once, yeah, we're going to keep. So that's
now. The next data source is one that I would hang my hat on. This is called GFK MRI. Sometimes you might have heard of it as Simmons. This is the longest standing and highest sample size consumer report done every year in the United States. They typically survey 50,000 people per wave of surveys, and sometimes we'll do multiple waves per year. So, and they're asking everything from what TV shows do you watch, what kind of toothpaste do you buy, what kind of car do you drive. They have a huge survey when they go into the market, and it allows you to cross tab where the person's from, what age are they, what are their interests, what do they watch. And this is the one that I mentioned costs over $20,000 a year to subscribe to. And their question is, do you participate in volleyball? That would be court, grass, beach, any kind of interest. Their estimate was 6.7 million. So in this case, between Statista and MRI, pretty close. And if we were to throw in the high school players, that bumps it up to about 7 million. But this is just the start. Okay, then we get to, well, how many beach volleyball fans are there? And I put casual beach volleyball fans for a reason. In this case, the estimate is 5 million in the United States. So about 2% of US adults. And this comes from 3 different research sources. If you were to ask Statista, they're closer to 4 million, but they don't have any source to where they got that data. If I were to go on Meta and only put people who are interested in the AVP, FIVB, or beach volleyball, it gives me a range of 4.1 to 4.8. If I were to go to that gold standard GFK, it asks, have you attended or watched a pro beach volleyball event in the past year? And in that case, their estimate was 5.6 million.
Does that include 2024? Because that's the Olympics, right? Like that could be a big difference between the Statista and the GFK.
This would include 2023, 2024 data. So
because the Statista one says 2023.
Yes. So again, you look at the range of about 4 million to 5.6 and say, all right, let's settle on about 5 million. That seems like a number we could live in. But again, we're still going into concentric circles. Now we get to active beach volleyball fans. And in this case, the question on GFK MRI is, do you regularly watch, listen to, or attend pro beach volleyball events? And in this case, again, you've gone from 5 million casual fans who just might have gone to one event in a calendar year to someone who is an active fan going to multiple events or watching or listening to multiple events if they don't attend.
You also distinguish between volleyball and now beach volleyball, right? So,
Correct.
so if you're an avid watcher of women's college indoor, then you're not going to be necessarily watching beach volleyball. And yeah, regularly is important too.
Regularly is the important one. Now we're down to 1.2 million. And again, that is 0.5% of US adults. Okay. We're going into, well, how many active volleyball players are there? Now, this is court, grass, or sand.
Wow.
The question is, do you regularly play any kind of volleyball at least once a month? Now, notice how this number of about 500,000 is different from the casual volleyball player. So this is someone who, again, might just knock it around with some friends when they're down at the beach, but they are not an active player. The active player is more like 500,000, someone who plays any kind of volleyball at least once a month.
Wow.
Yeah. So now from there, who are the real hardcore? Like if you're talking your diehard fans, what we would both call your Mavens, I put my best guess at about 150,000 hardcore Mavens in the United States. And that is based on looking at, well, what is a typical audience of volleyball specific content on the web? And if you look at, for example, the AVP has 129,000 subscribers. Their videos average somewhere between 30,000 to 100,000 per video. But actually, that was more like 5 to 6 years ago. The more recent ones are not nearly as high. You've got Better at Beach, which does have some higher videos where some are 250,000 views, but that would really, those tend to be lesson videos where your casual fan who just wants to learn how to bump, that's not someone who is a maven.
I went through this a little bit in my last video. Like these video numbers have high bounce rates, like very high bounce rates. So
yes,
normally about 40% bounce in the first 30 seconds.
So you've got the McKibbins. They have 117,000 subscribers. Their videos range between around 30,000 to 300,000 for their most popular ones a couple years ago. And then, of course, our friends at Sandcast with 7.5 thousand subscribers, and their videos tend to range between 5,000 to 30,000. Kind of looking across that, like what would be that crossover audience that's really a heavy consumer of volleyball content? I think 150,000 is a pretty good estimate for that.
I don't think we're going to get over that. Yeah.
But so this gives you your range from all the way out your outer edge of 34 million down to 150,000. And the way that would be a way to think about this is kind of your mindset. So on the outside, it's like, hey, my daughter plays for her high school volleyball team, which is why Facebook puts me interested in volleyball. Or right. I saw some highlights of volleyball during the last Olympics. Then you get into I like to bump it around during family picnics. Someone knows what a bump set spike and how to score, but they're not by any stretch a hardcore fan. Then you get into someone who attended one event. Like I went to the Chicago Open with friends last year. Then from there, now you get into more of the active fan, who's someone who would say something like, yeah, I root for the Taylors and saw them play 3 times last year. Right. This is what I would consider the start of a real fan.
Yeah.
Someone who went to the Chicago Open could have just gone there because
It's a
a
fun
friend
place too.
asked them.
Yep.
Uh, but once you go to multiple events and start to know the players' names, to me, that's what an actual fan is. Then from there, you get to the regular players. Like I play in a weekly league. And again, that could be court, it could be sand. But only then do you get to the Mavens. And those are the people who are like, we should change the rules to make volleyball more exciting
Yeah.
because, they're the
They're
ones who
bored.
are actively consuming volleyball content and want to mix it up because, I'm a
Yeah.
little sick of the current game. But someone who is in the I like to bump it around during family picnic stage, they're not going to be thinking about a rule change or how do we make volleyball more exciting.
No, no, not at all. And it tracks with what it tracks with the data that we had and interestingly, back in the 1990s, when they surveyed our crowd, there was 600,000 people that would come to our various events, 25 events, and 300,000 of them came to one event. All right, and then 150 was it 75,000 of them came to two events, and then a really small minority, 30,000 went to 10 events or more. All right, so
Well,
it
it's
kind of
funny.
tracks
I
with your
have a
data.
slide. I have a slide addressing that. What is your potential audience size,
Yeah.
both for TV, for streaming, and for events?
No, but what I was going to say, I was going to tie it back to your point. The people that consume a lot of volleyball, so if you're going to 10 plus events a year, you're the ones who want, hey, let's have a king of the beach. Let's have the partners flip up. Let's do mixed. Let's do city. Let's do something new. They always want something new. Whereas, the 300,000 are like what 90% of your audience that's going to come to one event. They came to watch the stars. They want to see, the best player. Oh, who's the best players? Who's the best team? And so like they're not, as you said, they're not interested in the rules or the changes of the rules are crazy.
Right. So that casual beach volleyball fans of 5 million, the
Mhm.
someone who went to the Chicago Open or Manhattan Beach Open, they don't think about the rules. They barely
No,
even know the players if they do.
no.
Um, so how much or what would be the audience size to monetize or a television viewership based on these type of numbers? And from what I can tell, the TV audience would sit somewhere in this range where you're reaching obviously your mavens, your active fans, and just a smidgen of your casual fans. But that would be based on a couple of different data points where in 2023, the D1 Women's Volleyball Championship between Texas and Nebraska averaged 1.9 million viewers on ABC. You have the ESPN Beach Volleyball Championships, which went from 123,000 in 2022 up to 380,000 in 2023. The Manhattan Beach Open on Ion recently was at 300,000 viewers. The Chicago Beach Open on CW was at 215,000 viewers. But this is only the data you can get or that's publicized because they're the major championships or major tour events on channels that are measured by Nielsen. If you were to look at like a regular season matchup of D1 volleyball, or if you were to do just a normal Florida event on the AVP tour, obviously your numbers would be far, far lower. And you can see where that TV audience sits. It's not all of your active fans. It's a sliver across that you're likely not going to get a casual uh, player or someone who just has general awareness necessarily turn on to watch a beach volleyball final on ESPN.
Yeah, all right. Yeah, but it's funny because I think whenever they put them on YouTube, and that's got to be that Maven, like that hardcore Maven, because you got to go search for it, you got to go find it, you got to know it's
Yes,
there. I don't think they reach more than 50,000, and again, that's with bounce
yes.
rates. But I'm surprised I haven't seen any data. Maybe it doesn't exist They don't have a regular season D1 women's college volleyball.
I couldn't find
Couldn't
that
find, yeah,
searching
I couldn't
around.
either. Yeah. That just
So
probably means it's like sometimes when it's sub 100,000, they have trouble they have trouble finding it.
So you had sent me a link from a 2018 Sandcast where Dave Mays from 1440 was interviewed, and uh, back in 2018, the goal at the time was to get to 4 million paid subscribers for what would have been streaming gated beach volleyball content, where you're paying, again, whether it's $4.99 a month, $10 a month, whatever that number would have been. The question is, how realistic would it be to get to 4 million? And
You take the under and you hammer it.
well, just to think, because you're going to have only a percent of any given audience that's willing to pay for it. And
Yeah.
just as an example, looking at football in America, rough estimate, you're looking at about 150 million would be your general NFL and college football audience. But if you look at how many people subscribe to the Red Zone, where now you're paying a monthly basis for things that, again, you could get for free if you were to just watch football on CBS, that's only 5 million. So that's a 3% ratio between kind of your outer edge and your inside willing to pay extra for that. And that 3% ratio rings pretty true in my marketing experience, that if you have someone come to an online website to make a purchase, if you get 3% of those people to your website make a purchase, that's a pretty good conversion rate. So that does not seem out of whack to me.
Yeah,
So
it's funny. My click-through rate on these videos is about 3% too on the
yeah,
total
it's a
impressions. It seems.
it's a pretty standard ratio. So now you look at, well, for volleyball, if you were to extend the same ratio to the outer edge of just general volleyball awareness, 3% of that would be a million. So already that estimate of 4 million is probably, this is only 25% of that. Now, I would even argue, if I were to make a more realistic estimate, I would think only 3% of maybe your casual beach fans, not someone who kid might play club indoor in Kansas City. I would think maybe only 3% of your casual beach fans would subscribe and pay for it. And that ratio is closer to 150,000 people, which ironically is your Mavens audience.
Yeah.
If you were to say active beach players, someone who's really into it, active beach volleyball fans, that 3% ratio is only 36,000. So I would say that a more realistic estimate of who would pay for streaming content in America for beach volleyball is somewhere between 36,000 and a million, and probably more on the lower end of that.
Yeah, I'm going to take the lower end too, because there's something we learned in business school, which I'll share with everybody here, is that the goal of every business is to get into a situation where you're getting what's called a recurring revenue. Okay, so that's a monthly fee, but that's not easy to do, and it really only happens in sort of quasi-monopoly situations. So the only time you have regular monthly bills are when you're kind of forced to. Your utilities, cable, for example, would be one of them. And it's very rare to get a recurring revenue model on, something like information or what's happening. Everybody sort of dreams, but if you remember your old newspapers and magazines, they packaged a lot up for you in a daily newspaper, and it didn't cost that much. So if you just were interested in the funnies or the sports page, you got the newspaper, but somebody else might be interested in the arts and the class, whatever, and somebody might be searching for a job. Right? When you disintermediated newspapers to the internet, they thought, hey, we'll just charge the same thing online. And except for, say, the New York Times and the Wall Street Journal, nobody else was able to do that. And the New York Times has really, really gotten their subscription numbers up because they have games. Again, they have to expand the total offerings of what they're offering, right? So you have your cable bill and you pay it and you get news and you get TV and you get sports and you get all the sports and it's kind of a package deal. And then they're trying to break it up. I mean, that's what they're trying to do. They're trying to take their entire audiences and get them to pay a monthly fee behind a paywall. And history and business school says it's probably not going to work. I mean, Netflix is the outlier, right? Because
Well,
people are
and
willing to pay
Netflix was
that.
early in the process where you had
Yeah.
the cord cutters.
Mhm.
So a lot of people gave up their $78 monthly cable bill where everything was bundled together and they realized I'm paying for 70 channels that I don't watch in order to get the five I do watch.
Yeah.
And a lot of people then started looking at that micro payment of Netflix. Well, it's only $5.99 a month back in the day. But you start to layer in, well, now I'm doing Netflix and I also am paying for Disney Plus and I'm also paying for Hulu and I'm paying for YouTube Premium and I'm paying for, at a certain point, you've already now are paying as much as your old cable bill, and it might be more customized to what you tend to watch. But if you are coming in as, let's say, the AVP and asking someone to add in another $4.99 per month, yes, it might just be a cup of Starbucks coffee, but people already have a certain budget that they pay for video content, and you could be very much bumping up against their pre-existing budget.
Well, another thing is that this assumes, that Dave May thing assumes that there's going to be content on the channel. Okay, so like if they were to launch one today with two tournaments, Huntington Beach and Manhattan Beach, although I think Manhattan Beach is on a cable company, but in their three non-ones and what, eight different tournaments, I mean they're going to have a lot more content, in terms of that to get people to pay that even $4.99, and that's costly. So the one question is, yeah, the subscribers probably aren't going to pay for the amount of content that you need. And then the second thing is that traditionally sports have been free. Okay, they've always been free or behind some sort of like a cable bill paywall. Which remember we all got kind of puppy dogged into paying the cable bill, right? Because first it was like just a really great, it was a better quality product, and they added more channels then they started raising the price. But the difference between, say, what I've read is the difference between, say, and Netflix is you kind of know you're going to get a movie and you know what you're going to watch. But with sports, you're not quite sure whether you're going to get a good event. Like that's kind of why, you know, uh, for example, we just had the Four Nations hockey. Now, I guarantee you, they're going to do huge numbers, and I guarantee you, nobody 2 weeks ago was planning on watching that hockey match. So it would be
Mm-hmm.
difficult to even capture that audience under this sort of what he's talking about, the monthly pay, the subscriber pay, because you're not sure what you're going to get, right? Like now, football probably has a better chance to do that because you kind of know what you're going to get, right? So they probably have a better chance of getting subscribers because a football game, an NFL football game, is going to be good, I guess.
I totally
Like,
agree. And I
like
think
Wait,
looking at,
one last thing, because
oh, go ahead.
I know they've tried that for the Olympics. They've tried to put things behind paywall, and they were disasters. Not to mention like CNN tried to do a paywall. That didn't work out. And others have tried paywalls. So it's a tough. It's a yeah. Again, it's really complicated, tough. It's new technology. It's this thing I'm talking about how like, well, what am I going to get? All right, what am I going to get on this, volleyball behind a volleyball paywall? Take a look at like the international competition, the FIVB. Okay, they don't even have a schedule, or they do it, but it comes out late. You're not quite sure are the events going to be good? You don't even know if the players are going to be in the event. So I did a study last year, which I tracked how many of the top 16 teams went to their Elite 16 tournaments. Okay. And like 50% of the field weren't the top 16 players. So you're not even sure if I buy this package, whether the
Mm-hmm.
tournaments they're going to have are going to actually have all the top volleyball players because they're not required to even play. It's just, it's small.
Well, and when I look at a chart like this,
Mhm.
what it tells me is that if you want to fund your organization, if you want to fund the AVP or a 1440 or some kind of competitive tour, that this type of business model is uh,
Not going to
destined
work.
for disappointment.
It's not going to.
It's not going to work out. So there needs to be a different model in order to make that happen.
Well, what I say is the monetization of the sport comes from the platform, not directly from the sport. So if in order to make beach volleyball work internationally and domestically, the AVP is the money has to come from somewhere else. And actually, that's the
Mm-hmm.
same thing because the football game doesn't pay for the football. It's the carrying fees that the cable companies pay to the NFL and the NBA that is the major revenue generator of those. Okay, like the amount of money they pay to those organizations don't I mean, what do you pay now? You pay now $10 per month for ESPN, and they transfer 2 billion of that to the NFL. Right, so it's again it's buried into your cable bill. And that's the main business of the NFL, the NBA, the NHL, and the MLB are carrying fees on cable. So not
Correct.
not not like as a percentage of revenue, that's huge in the NFL. Local cable for like baseball is big. And yeah, the amount of money they get from sort of ticket sales and merchandise is just a piece of the pie. Yeah.
So I have a couple more slides here. Now, as far as a global audience for
Mhm.
streaming, this was an interesting article that was published in September by Volleyball TV, where the claim is that they hit a milestone of 1.5 million Volleyball TV members globally, which is a 77% year over year growth. Um, Now, I don't know what you've heard separately, but because this isn't an audited number by a third party measurement service like Nielsen, uh, really they could put any number out there, or it could be a free member. It doesn't mean you
Yeah.
actually paid for it in order to be considered. If you're Volleyball TV, you could have given out 700 free memberships for a month if you wanted to. So I
Well,
don't know how realistic this number is.
I mean, yeah, exactly. His members, subscribers, is that who pays the 4.99 or the 9.99? This volleyball TV is indoor and beach. The number I heard was 250,000. Okay, and that came from a good source apparently. That was last year, I think. So again, this could be right. It could not. That's what I heard was 250,000. That comes from a good source. What came from a bad source or a mediocre source was that the volleyball TV is bleeding money, and they are concerned about that.
Well, moving on, one interesting fact, once you start to dice out the data a little bit more, is where is this audience in the United States?
Hmm.
And looking at Meta, so that again, that was the largest data source, your casual fan.
Hmm.
If you were to look at what is the beach volleyball audience by state, interestingly, it's not heavily weighted to California, which would have been my hunch, but Texas at 24%, Florida at 23%, and then California ranges between 18 and 20%, followed by New York and Illinois. And interestingly, if you were to look at what locations the AVP did with their city versus city, it mirrors this audience breakdown. So at least the AVP is reflecting where the audience is in where they put the teams. But the question obviously is, well, if you were to take a beach volleyball hardcore audience, again, going back to this active beach volleyball fan of 1.2 million, if you were to take only 18% of that in California, that number gets pretty small pretty quickly. So
Yeah.
once you start to section it out by geography. So
Hold on, it's not because I've been pumping the Dallas Stream. I got see my
yes,
merch.
you're doing your best, and I do appreciate, and I'm sure everyone in Dallas does as
That,
well.
that's why Texas. That's why Texas is number one. I've been promoting them. That's my team. It's my
So,
team. Lifelong fan.
so looking at the different business models you've talked about in previous podcasts, to me, the largest potential audience would be if you were doing events like the 90s type tour, which were on established beaches at low to no cost.
Yeah.
That allows you to target people or appeal to people who might only go to one event per year. So they are not the person who's going to subscribe at $9.99 a month. This is someone who, oh yeah, I bump it around with my friends, and oh, you've got tickets for this event in Hermosa, and or it's free, and you
Yeah.
just are looking for something to do on a Sunday, uh, and you go down and there's 20,000 people. So this is really where, if you're going to monetize this sport, and if I were, say, getting paid to advise a governing body, I would say this is where your audience needs to be in this realm, appealing to that casual beach fan all the way down to the Mavens, because this is where your audience can get large enough to monetize it to potential sponsors. But if you look at that TV audience or your pay per streaming potential audience, which is only a couple 100,000, that is too small to attract someone that is going to be a major sponsor, like an Oakley or the old Miller Lite type of sponsorships.
Yeah, I mean, I could really believe that because, and we've talked about that in our last video. I'm not sure. I'm not even sure the way forward is via sponsorships on a CPM basis. It's just too low. I mean, I've said in previous things they're going to have to get on the product side somehow. I mean, I think I know a whiskey company that I know very well sponsored the Genesis Los Angeles Open last year. I think they did this year, but it was at the Riviera, and they had a spot right on the 18th hole, and I think 200,000 people go to that event over the 4 day period plus,
Mm-hmm.
and they were right at the 18th green, and I think they charged them. I think they paid $75,000. Okay, for that gigantic of an audience. So, beach volleyball probably doesn't get tenth of that. Like you're not going to pay for much there. So,
Right. You basically would want someone who sees either your audience or your athletes as almost like a co-brand opportunity.
yeah.
So whether it's an athlete that they will use in their advertising, they will feature that athlete because of either the way they look or their health or the kind of sunglasses they're wearing. Or it's a co-branded product, to your
Yeah.
point,
Yeah.
where it's, let's say it's a hard seltzer and it is a brand plus AVP plus particular athlete sponsoring that hard seltzer, which is sold at the events themselves and then off in grocery stores.
Yeah, exactly. I mean,
But it has to be more for it has to be more for a sponsor than just the eyeballs that show up at an event.
well, what I always say is you got to try to figure out a way to get 50 to $100 per these people. Let's say 50. Like what's 50? 50 times your 1.2 million is 600 $6 million. All right.
Hmm.
That there you are. Like we were about 8.5 million when I played in the 90s. Leonard Armando got it to about 12 million. And that's right where you are. It's that 50 to $100 for that from that 1.2 million people is what you're trying to drive at. which you can probably only do on the product side. I mean, the reality is that the AVP, their business model is to convince people to lose their money on it. That's kind of how they're operated, and everyone seems to fall into it every time. Like that Mays one, there's a link to it in which he lost $12.5 million really quickly because he had numbers and estimates that weren't even close. And a guy like Greg here just he's his talent and what he does for a living and his experience, he's just able to pull these things out there. And with this is now you have to kind of solve the problem of how to get
Right.
revenue.
So if you're able to make better business decisions on reality as opposed to someone or going on Statista and saying, oh, there's X
30,
number of volleyball
37 million
players. Yeah, 37 or 900
yeah,
million
900.
worldwide. If you were to base your business decisions off of that, that's, I think, where people get themselves into trouble.
They definitely do, and and the volleyball community sells them that. They sell them that sort of dream and those numbers, and I understand that, and I get it. But eventually, those people lose their money, and then they have to sell. And another problem is like with a lot of conversations I have with people is when you get into the point of what we're talking about here, Greg, they quickly say that's not what I want to do. Like they all think geez, there's so many people. Like the number of people who are into volleyball are so huge. You guys are messing up your business model. I'm gonna make a killing on this thing. They think there's like a pile of money just to be picked up, and don't realize, and it's work for somebody who wants to do it. And if they did, they would make a lot of money. But you have to understand where you're going to get where you're going to get the CPMs from, and it's not sponsorships, and it's not going to be ticket sales either, right? Because that's problematic too, especially on public beaches. But
Right. Well, and you've had several podcasts on the single ownership model
that's
and
tough.
how that is really fraught for a sport like volleyball, and how really the underlying issue is the ownership group wanting to come in and profit and control it. So the optionality you talked about the last time, where if you think that you're going to come in and be the organization that is the profit center, that is already that is a fallacy walking into it. And that I know in previous videos you talked about really the only people who could potentially make money would be your marketing agency, the local promoters, and the players.
That's it.
And if you're not one of those three,
Nope.
then you're likely not going to make money in volleyball.
No.
And so if I'm a hedge fund, or if I'm a deep-pocketed investor and I'm not one of those three, well, why should I get involved?
Yeah, because they think they can financialize it. I mean, a single entity ownership model, which is very difficult to pull off, it only really happens in combat sports where you have to fix the fights, and I've discussed that. It's not, you curate the athletes, or in motorsports, for example. The main challenge for a single entity ownership, which is what the AVP is, so a guy owns it. One is there's a lack of legitimacy in the competition. Okay, and you see that where they just come in like, hey, we're going to go city versus city league. Okay. That's not a competition. And, when you're asking people to watch a sport, one, it has to be a sport. And I've beaten everybody over the head with a stick on that one. It's got to be a legitimate competition. And it's not just volleyball or these guys. Everybody thinks they can do it. USFL, XFL, I mean, Live Golf. like, Saudi Arabia with billions of dollars are just completely floundering because when you have a single entity ownership model, you have to overcome the legitimacy problem. And then the second issue with a single entity owner is that these are belief systems, and it's very difficult for a single person to make the right decision, right? As Al Davis used to say at the owner meetings. Al Davis was the owner of the Raiders, Oakland Raiders. He goes, "Well, we're going to have 2 days of meetings where they're going to pose a bunch of rules, and at the end, I'm just going to say no to everything. I'm going to block them all." Like you just say, "Hey, what's the first thing everybody does when they own the sport? We got to change the rules." Like how about no? Like, oh, it's more exciting. So it's very difficult for a single person to make the decisions, especially in a belief system like that. You need more of anyway. That's the
Well,
problem.
but you've really, I think, hammered home the nature of competition
Hmm.
and what does it mean to be a competitive sport.
Hmm.
And as a fan and a watcher of volleyball, I have seen the pathway into the sport shrink considerably over time, where instead of having multiple contender events, where you can be ranked somewhere between 20 and 150 and have a great weekend and work your way into a main draw. And that's how you keep those people who are on the fringes of the sport active, training, working hard, dreaming, is to give them a pathway in where it's like, man, I just have one great weekend and I'm in the main draw. If it is a city versus city and it's a pre-selected, this is your two teams. Well, what does that tell the people who are essentially working their way up? It tells them that you don't have a pathway.
Well, first of all,
And
they're not teams; they're exhibitions. But yeah, it's an exhibition between the viewership numbers are even lower when it's not a real sport, when it's an exhibition. So even those ones that Greg you were giving to everybody, just reduce them by probably 90% when it's just a practice or an exhibition. It's not real. Like, and you see that with the numbers that came out from the NBA All-Star game versus this Four Nations Hockey Cup versus what I think the NHL was getting 1 million viewers on their All-Star game, and this is probably going to do 10 million. All right, between in North America, right, America and Canada, the Saturday game did, and they will for sure beat that again because it was a legitimate competition. The best on best playing for something where they both cared about it, right?
cared enough to fight a lot.
Yeah, and get injured. Some of the guys are injured and can't play
Hmm.
their regular season NHL. And some of the NHL owners are pissed that they sent these guys there and they got injured. And so it's difficult. It's tough. Like again, I haven't said this yet because I was thinking about that after my last podcast with the Elite 16s, which I came out of the gate and said that's dumb. They need to be open. They're going to the Elite 24. And the excuse that Volleyball World FIVB gave is they wanted to make it more affordable for the promoter to put on a tournament and have less courts. And the problem is the events aren't profitable. Okay. They're not running the events correctly to make them profitable. I mean, you want to have more athletes playing because, well, one, you make money on them. Okay. Like one of the sources of revenue back in our day for the promoter was they would hold a qualifier and charge everybody a couple $100 to play in the qualifier. And if you won the
Hmm.
qualifier, you got in the AVP tournament. You got to play with the pros. I mean, every weekend we'd show up, Karch and I, at 9 a.m. on a Saturday morning and like flying overnight, waking up in the morning, time change at 6 a.m. And when we got to the court, because we played the worst seed, we were number one seed, we played the worst seed, which was always the qualifier. And goddamn, 1,000 of their friends and family were there going crazy at 9 a.m. And we were
Right,
barely
because
able.
they've played two
This,
days of
this,
cutthroat volleyball
oh, yeah,
just just to go against the number one seed. And they're hungry, they're
yeah.
tired, but how jazzed are you? And for them, it's like that taste and a reward of winning the tournament, a 2 day tournament in the qualifiers to get
Yeah,
there.
yeah. But hold
And
on.
I
So every time I got to tell this story. Every time Karch would kind of be a little pissed because they were getting a little loud. They were going. He would try to hit a ball as hard as he can to show these qualifiers who's boss, and he'd get roofed, and it hit him in the face, and his glasses would go flying. He'd cut his nose, and it started bleeding down his nose, like almost every week. And the place would go nuts, and they'd go high fiving, and then next, we'd lose fifth. We beat them 15-2. That was like the one point they got, and they come over. Hey, can we get the picture of the glasses and the bloody nose and the whole thing? It was like every week. But my point was like the reason why we did is we made money. Our events made money. All right. The problem with the Elite 16 and the FIVB and the volleyball world is they don't make money. Okay. If you're losing money on the event, then yeah, you think the solution is to cut the field size down, right? Oh, let's make it 16. Let's just have the best. And it's not an open event. It's not an open tournament. It's not an actual competition. You're just what is it on that tread? You're just on a like a squirrel on a wheel. You're going nowhere. Yeah, like I just heard a interesting story about the U.S. Open tennis. Is they're going to take the mixed doubles and put it before the tournament. All right, so they want to separate out the mixed doubles because they want the top players to play in the mixed competition, which they normally don't because they're playing in the singles. Sometimes the singles play in the doubles. All right, but the mixed people are all upset because you become a mixed tennis specialist, right? Mm-hmm. And you're like, hold on, we don't want the good guys playing now. This is my area in the sandbox. Well, because the U.S. Open makes so much money and it's so many people come, they can do so many things that most people can. And again, whenever I see these, whether it's the city versus city of the league, the restricted tournaments, the Elite 16, you're not having a full field. Like you said, the people are having difficulty getting in. It's not only a non-legitimate customer, but it's a symbol of the fact that they're not running the business wrong because you'd want it to be more people and bigger.
Well, and think about what is your minor leagues, if you will, in the sport. So most sports, if you're baseball, you have single A, double A, triple A. You have a whole feeder system into the major sport. If you're talking about soccer, you have academies. If you're over in Europe, you've got the National League, League One, the Championship. You have all of these pathways to hone your skills and to work your way into the top level of your sport. Well, what's the pathway for a volleyball player in the United States if you're a beach player?
Well, it's not a real sport, as I keep saying. Every real sport, every legitimate sport is open. Today I'm 56, but it doesn't matter. I can go play in the NFL if I'm good enough.
It should be.
They'll find you. They'll find you. Trust me. I mean, yeah, there's 128 people in the main draw singles men's in the U.S. Open and Wimbledon, and there's another 100 plus in the qualifier, and there's all sorts of ways to qualify. I've mentioned that before, and but it's ready? Ready? How do I get on a team, one of these teams, on the AVP and kick the shit out of everybody else, right? And who decides the teams? They're going to have a qualifier for the teams, and then they're going to decide who's wait a minute. So who's Dallas? Dallas is my guy Partain. I already bought the shirt. Are you telling me he's not going to be on Dallas again? It's
well, and then I believe there's a wild card where I think the league can just choose who they want.
Yeah. That's how teams work. The city team. I mean, and I in my opinion, fans are not fooled. Now he uses the term casual fan, which I also hate and I bristle at. I like the term Maven fan. But what I like instead of the word casual fan, because that kind of denotes that they're casual, I call them real fans. I call them sports fans. All right. I call them people who are not going to watch nonsense or garbage or lower quality events. I mean, there's a reason why everyone watches the premier part of every sport, right? There's a reason why the Super Bowl is the highest watch. The playoffs are higher than the regular season. In all sports, that's the case. The majors have higher viewership than tour events, not because a casual fan is there. It's because a sports fan, someone who likes sports and says, I know when in Augusta on the second Sunday of April, every great golfer in the world is going to be trying their hardest to win that event. And that is the top competition. That's what they want to see. They want to see They, like you gather the world's greatest athletes in the sport and you have them compete against each other in meaningful competitions that they will die for. Okay, that is what is compelling from an audience viewership perspective. And anytime you interrupt that or break that apart or mess with that, you'll see this a dramatic drop in your audience. It's just
Well, all you
again,
have to do is talk to the athletes or listen to
of
an
course,
interview, and you can have a, a, a Tiger Woods level golfer say, the most nervous I have been over a putt is a 3-footer at the end of the Masters,
yeah, yeah.
or a Ryder Cup when their country is counting on them to make that 3-footer. And that is the true test of, is this an athletic competition?
Yeah.
If they've done 30 years of training and their hands are shaking over a putt.
Yeah, like and you clearly see that in
And you
live
can
golf.
tell, you can
They don't
tell as an
care. Yeah,
audience.
they like look. I've played. I tell this story a lot. The only thing you want to win are the championships. We had a tour in which every event was a win a championship. So we tried. We were competitive, but we did play in some exhibitions and all sorts of stuff. And a lot of guys didn't care. I mean, even a lot of guys didn't even care about most tour events. Tim Hovland is world famous for saying, "Who cares about Rhode Island?" All right, I care about Manhattan Beach. Like, he's like, who cares? Like, don't care about a regular tour event. He was very, very outward. But we played one time. We played in an exhibition, and I think it was Karch and I versus Jose Loyola and Adam Johnson, and it was a one game $100,000 winner take all. And they thought that would be great. Well, we all got together and said, hey, we're just going to split the money 50,000, 50,000. Like, let's just play an exhibition. But we said one thing. We said no matter what, we're just going to talk a lot of crap to each other, like just all the game, but nobody's going to get like upset or offended. Like it's we'll just whatever we hit the ball, like yeah, we'll point at them like that, just as a, sort of we were faking it. Okay, well at the end of the thing, like I think we won, but that didn't matter because we split the money, which we weren't supposed to do, and everyone was like, that was the greatest we've ever seen. You guys, it was because the 100,000 winner take all was why you guys were so passionate about it. I go, yeah, if we only knew. Now you do 30 years later. Okay. So what Greg is saying,
Because
I am
you
saying
know as a
as
competitor
an
whether you
athlete.
care or not.
Look, you don't dream growing up of winning a nonsensical like city versus city league. Like you don't grow up you grow up dreaming of winning of the Olympics or the Stanley Cup or like the Manhattan Beach Open or the World Championships. Like you're not going to sacrifice. Like athletes sacrifice a lot. All right, a lot of people see athletes at the end when they're getting paid a ton of money and are on TV. They don't see the sacrifices that athletes had to make from the time they were 10 to 12 to 14 years old to the time they made it to the pros. The injury. I got cuts all over my body from my playing days that I'm not going to be playing against the Dallas Dream and getting shoulder surgery and knee surgery and elbow surgery. All right, like that's not going to happen. You're not going to like you risk your health, you risk your relationships. You have to focus. You have to give up a lot in life. Like God, I don't want to go on too much. I don't want to feel like I'm complaining. That's what I wanted to do. All right, that was what drove me. All right, to
Mhm.
train, to get up, to do the work, and all that stuff. That's what drove us. And so yeah, it's now so clear with the data, like because again, what's happening is the sports are reaching the limits of the financialization of their sports, and they're trying to get extra revenue. They've expanded the regular season, they've expanded the playoffs, and now they have to put on special events or weird events or with the da things because they're trying to generate more revenue, and they're losing that competition within it, and you're seeing it all the time. And we're like, again, just I think like the Saudis have lost $5 billion on fake golf tournaments. All right, that
Mhm.
nobody that they got 14,000 people or something like that, 12,000 people to watch the one in Saudi Arabia. Nobody watches them, and everybody knows, what's going on. Athletes
Now,
and
you went to the Hermosa Open last year, right? Which was
Manhattan.
modeled
Oh, I like
more,
Hermosa and Manhattan.
but
Yeah.
but Hermosa was more modeled after the older school style tournament, right?
It was open. It was an open, arena, if you want. Yeah, they didn't have the full build.
Right. What was your experience with that?
It was sparsely populated, or in terms of fans. The athletes were trying, and it made money, from what I understand. So it didn't lose $1.5 million.
Hmm.
So the biggest thing that Mark Paolui did was he broke even, I think, especially. Hopefully he made some money. That would be nice for him because he put in a lot of work. Uh, but yeah, so that is a success. Now again, it's difficult because it just sort of popped up. He had like 3 or 4 months to put it together, and hopefully over time, if he continues with it, which is again, we'll see if we'll see if that happens. But that's the only well, look. That's the only way you can do it. The only way you can do it is a local guy, local promoter, working with the city to develop something. It would be better if the AVP came in as the is on top of that to do the national sort of stuff. But yeah, it was it was good. He had the full thing going.
So I know we've talked in the past about how the AVP could move from a single ownership model to a nonprofit. So, what would be the ramifications of doing that for the AVP?
Well, the point is if you're going to be a single entity owner, which they are, they have to do it in a certain way, and they're not. One of the things you get when you're a nonprofit is you solve the major problem, which is access to the beaches. Okay,
Hmm.
that's the key. So, Mark Paolui was able to get a good deal from the city of Hermosa Beach. He didn't have to pay the fees. He didn't have to pay all the money you have to that AVP has to pay an enormous amount of money to the city of Manhattan Beach to put on an event because, look, like you're asking a lot of a city government to allow a for-profit enterprise to use public lands. So it's a public beach, and yeah, it's a beach
That's a
volleyball tournament.
major disruption for all the setup and
Well, yeah, but it's the public's it's a public park, and you're a for-profit entity. And by the way, there's 1,000 other people who have ideas to use that beach as well. Like, what about my sand tennis event I want to put on? What about like everyone's screaming at them? So you do solve a lot of the problems with a nonprofit. So like back in the 90s, so AVP was a nonprofit. It was a players association. So we all agreed to play only in our tournaments and not in others. Miller was a sponsor centric model. So they really kind of owned it, right? So they kind of put up all the money. And we worked with local promoters, which were the distributors. So the distributors had a big part in helping us promote and put together the individual events. That's something that no people don't adequately remember or recognize was probably half to 75% of our success was there was a local Miller distributor that was driving local advertising and marketing and promotion and bringing a lot of the people to the beach, right? That helped us out a lot. So
right, because for them it was a great association that uh, makes it easier for them to sell into bars, grocery stores. They can put on a local party, bring people that they want to schmooze to the event.
yeah, all
It's a
their
great
accounts. Yeah. Oh,
right. So
it was the biggest thing in their territory during the year. Everyone loved it. Yeah. All the bars, all the restaurants, all the supermarkets, all the stores. And of course, Bubba, the Miller distributor, he loves everybody and knows everybody in his district. He's like that's what I call the guy, just the generic Bubba, because they all have giant necks, right? Or like
but
or golf shirts with
Bubba
giant
also
necks.
probably
Bubba was the
knows
best.
they know the local radio station.
Of course.
Uh,
He's one of the biggest
and
advertisers amongst them all, right? So,
right.
they do what he needs to do. But the AVP as a for-profit entity could still operate, but what they're failing to understand is structure, stability, platform, scalability. They have the wrong structure, so therefore there's no stability in the sport. That's why it keeps changing all the time because there's no stability. Once you have the stability, now you have a platform. With the AVP, what a for-profit single entity ownership needs to do is to give up on the below the platform part of it. All right, that's what they're getting wrong and then focus on maximizing the platform like we're talking about in terms of you want somebody else to be generating your audience and then this part above the for-profit part the single entity owner has to figure out how to get the $50 to $100 out of them. right?
Right.
Like that somebody you got to they don't. And the reason they don't is simple. They don't believe they can sell the package to somebody else. So they invest in it thinking they're going to sell it within 6 to 7 years. It's a financialization of it. They don't think they can sell the package unless they control it from soup to nuts. And it's gonna fail. It's gonna always fail. All right. And there are models out there of single entity ownerships where under the situation, and they have sold, right? Like, but they don't want to do it. It's what USFL and XFL did. Instead of selling the individual teams and owning the top portion, they felt they had to control it all because they think, oh, we'll be able to sell this whole package to Endeavor IMG or or some private
Right.
equity, Fenway Sports Group, right? And that's what they're trying to do.
Well, if you look at franchise values over time, if you had bought into the LA Dodgers back in the 80s and you look at what that franchise is worth today, it's tempting to think, oh, if I were to only own all of these teams, I just have to wait 15 years and they're going to quadruple in value. And so
Yeah.
that's the temptation, right?
Except that the only way a sport works is if the teams are individually owned. The only way baseball works is the Dodgers want to beat the Yankees, and they're two separate guys who are trying their hardest to compete against each other. Exactly. So yeah, everyone. That's what USFL, XFL. They're like, hey, if we can just get 10% of the audience of the NFL, but we own the whole thing, we'll get all the you add the $8 billion per franchise times 32 NFL teams. I get all that money. Well,
Right.
nobody shows up and very few people watch. They get sub 1 million on their television, like zero audience, and they're hemorrhaging money. I mean, they lose so much money. But that's again, every single sport that's a physical activity that is successful has a distributed ownership model. All right, so take that: golf, tennis, all distributed; baseball, hockey, football, and basketball, distributed ownership models. All right, we sort of had a distributed model as well back in the '90s when we were successful.
So when did
FIVB
that change?
when it went bankrupt, we lost the asset.
What year was that?
98. 98 went well, the first bankruptcy, then it went into bankruptcy. Yeah, there's an asset value in the AVP in the ball contract, which is about $750,000 to $1 million a year. So that's this egg that's sitting in the thing. That if it wasn't for that, nobody would ever try to buy the thing. Then they sit around and do your numbers with the number of women's women's club, indoor volleyball, and think they're going to get a CPM on that of something, and that never works.
So
But
basically, what you're saying is that what gets sold to a potential investor is, hey, there are millions of club volleyball high school girls players out there, and if only we get X% of them to be fans, we're gonna make a ton of money.
just it's you could hear it in Dave May in his interview. He lays it out quickly. When Travis and Tri say, no, there's only this many people, it's like, whoa, wait a minute. My projections are like way larger than that. We have a problem. Like, yeah. So they sit there and they go, hey, there's 70 million potential people, and if you just get a CPM, if you get $10 out of them, then yeah, that's how they sell it. Oh, it's just been mismanaged. Oh, it just needs more marketing. Look at the growth of women's sand volleyball. Like I've heard, oh, look at women's club volleyball, and I sit down with these people and they go, this is the conversation because they call me, all of them. You don't hear about them because I don't drive them off, but I explain what the situation is like. Oh, I don't want to do that. I don't want to get into the product business. I thought I was going to get into the sports business. Well, so I go, well, what if you were to do everything right? This is the question. If you do everything you wanted to and it worked out perfectly, what's your estimate of total revenue? And they go, well, $40 million. And I go, okay, now I know you're lying to me. Give me the real number. Like you're sandbagging it because you wouldn't be in here if you thought it was 40 million. So be honest with me. And I'll be honest with you. They're like 80 million. And I go, I don't think it's 3 or 4. Okay. So these people sit there
So
and
they're off by like a standard deviation or
order of
more.
magnitude order of magnitude. And I tell them, I said, well, then they look at you like, that's not possible. I go, well, that's why I like bringing you on, is you show these numbers, right? You got a million too. All right. If you get 10, if you get $50 out of them, that's $6 million. All right. You're still not close to 80 million. All right. You're gonna have to get a lot more than that if you're gonna try to get to those numbers. And I also tell this to people. I go, if you want to make money in beach volleyball, I go, what do you, all right, first, you want to lose money? I go, you want to break even? You want to make $1 million? You want to make $10 million? You want to make $20 million? You want to make $250 million? You want to make $1 billion? All right. Tell me which number you want, and I'll tell you what business model you need to do. And what do they always tell me? What do they always say?
I'm going to guess a very high number.
Yeah, they go for the billion. All right, they go for the $1 billion. They say $1 billion, Ken. I go, well, it's funny because there was two companies that came out of the 1990s beach volleyball, whose first marketing spend was in beach volleyball, and they became $1 billion businesses. That was Oakley Sunglass Company and Massimo, a clothing company. All right. So if you want to make money in beach volleyball as a single entity ownership, you're going on the product side. And that's how you get to the $1 billion. And like, well, we don't like who's the owner of Mark Cuban? So Mark Cuban says never get into a clothing business or a product.
Mm-hmm.
He's always like, it's the dumbest idea, restaurants and clothing. Okay, so here's Kent saying, if you want to make money beach volleyball, you better have a clothing line of some kind. And
Well, what other product lines would be a good fit for beach volleyball? I mean,
well,
obviously, you've got like sunscreens, you've got footwear potentially, you've got alcoholic drinks, non-alcoholic drinks, energy drinks. What else comes to mind?
well, they are always high margin products, right? So gambling, alcohol, like you said, clothing or branded clothing. I don't think you do shoes in beach volleyball, possibly. But yeah, it's like pharmaceuticals, like branded products, energy drinks, like you talked about, like Red Bull. Red Bull and Monster sponsor a lot of stuff in the sports world. Like I think like my model is always like I talk about Barstool. So Barstool, they have the Spitting Chicklets, which is like the number one hockey podcast. And one of the guys says, yeah, what he really likes is like pink lemonade vodka. All right, so they created a product with New Amsterdam called Pink Whitney. All right, Pink
Hmm.
Whitney, and they sold $19 million of it in the first round or their first part, and it's a huge seller and they make a lot of money, So, yeah, and so Barstool Sports, which is a sports media company, they get about a third of their revenue from like, ads, on their website, but they get a third from merch and they get a third from product, right? So they're selling clothing and they're selling, I think High Noon might be a Gallo Barstool collab, if I'm not mistaken.
Well, that model was recently used also by some YouTube golfers. There's a
Yeah,
channel called Bob Does Sports that's approaching 1 million subscribers that just puts out fun golf type content. And now they have partnered with their own clothing line.
of
So they
course.
have Breezy Golf is their
Hmm.
clothing line. They have their own drinks. So it's an alcoholic drink called Have a Day.
Yeah,
They've created their own events where they bring in fans to a course. They have a weekend scramble. Of course, they're selling merchandise. They're selling or giving away Have a Day drinks. And they've created their own multiple uh, revenue streams by first having the audience. So they didn't get a drink first. They created the audience and then someone wanted to work with them and partner
yeah.
with them. So
Well,
the
you
audience
gather
has
an
to
au-
come
yeah,
first.
you
Yeah,
gather the audience, then you sell them something. Okay,
right.
and but yeah, that's not what that's again. But the problem with that is that's hard work. All right, so
Yes.
that's actually a job, which is what we used to do in the '90s. We worked. All right, there was a lot of people working to develop an audience and sell them something. And now what you see are people who do not have experience in this business, such as these people we've discussed in previous podcasts. and they just get waylaid by the reality of what it takes to make money in the sports business. I mean, yeah, you can look at franchise values for the major sports now, right? The premium professional sports, but they were losing money for decades and decades of 100 years probably. Okay, and they were very, very difficult to manage, and they required a lot of hard work, right? Controlling costs, generating audience, selling them peanuts, all sorts of stuff for a long period of time. So people kind of forget that only because of cable television and the recent what's happened since 1990. First, the explosion in sports marketing, where if you slap someone, an athlete, it sells. And second of all, you cannot sell cable subscriptions without live sports. And once you're
Right.
in that position, you own these channels. You own ESPN, you own the cable companies. There's nothing they can do about it. Every once in a while they come out and they say we're gonna turn off your channel right before CBS did it, right before March Madness, we're gonna turn off CBS. Yeah, right. Okay, they're gonna riot if they don't get March Madness. So, and that'll eventually work itself out as all monopoly situations do. But that people have a lack of appreciation for that specific part of business history or now technology and its effects on sports franchise valuation. So the game now is to dump a lot of money into sports, especially women's sports. I mean, if you want to raise money for women's sports, then now is the time. And I've mentioned that. I mean, if the women beach volleyball players were to break off and do their own city versus city league, they could probably raise 35, $40 million like that. I believe. I mean, that's what PVF. I mean, Love B. They're raising enormous amounts of money. Undivided or Unrivaled, the 3-on-3 basketball league that nobody's watching. I'm watching it. It's kind of fun. Remember we talked about that? We talked about you
Yeah.
said lower the rim. We had
Yeah.
a conversation.
I'm a big fan of the lower the
I
rim.
said shrink the court, and they have 3-on-3, so it opens it up. It's actually not bad if you like women's basketball, but they're getting even smaller audiences than WNBA, which is small audiences with the entire NBA marketing machine behind them. So there is a lot of fine. It's like it's right now in sports. It's like the internet boom of the late '90s. They are just dumping money. I mean, PGA raised $1.5 billion like that from a consortium of people. You know,
Well, but going back to the whole feeder uh, issue, women's beach actually does have a pretty good feeder program because it's become a college sport. And you see if you're down in like Huntington Beach, huge tournaments of college women's college sports.
yeah.
So you now have almost like a minor leagues, if you will, into pro women's volleyball that I'm not really seeing on the guys' side.
No, no, yeah. Well, you're not going to get a college men's sand volleyball, but contrast that men's sports will always be more popular than women's sports. Anywhere from 2 to 3 to 100 times larger. So you can monetize professional men's easier than you could professional women's beach volleyball, except for the caveat I said that they're dumping financing money into them right now.
Right. So it doesn't have to make financial sense at the time. They're just betting on the future.
Well, they think that if they can get women to watch women's sports, then they can get all sorts of product. They get a whole bunch more product to sell them, right? So they can sell them like one of the sponsors of the Unrivaled. I can't even remember the name. Unrivaled is Sephora. So on the back
Right.
shirts of the refs, it says Sephora, which is obviously the women's cosmetics company. So they believe that
Which you
they'll
can't
be.
necessarily do for the men's side. That would be a little awkward.
Yeah, yeah. You're not going to do like chicken wings and beer on the women's side. So, like they have Eli Lilly and they have like plus a lot of companies have segmented marketing dollars for women's sports specifically. But yeah, like that's the plan. The game plan is that if you can get women to watch women's sports, you'll open up a whole new category of advertising dollars coming into sport. But it hasn't worked out that way. As Adam Silver asked the WNBA players, he said, "How come your colleagues aren't watching you? How come your peers aren't watching you?" And that's that women don't watch women don't watch sports in the same amount as men, and when they do, they watch what everyone else watches: football,
Hmm.
basketball, baseball, hockey, tennis, and golf. Like there's like the number one sport women watch is football. So no
Yeah, that makes
surprise
a lot
there.
of sense.
Yeah, so we'll see if women's flag football will do it, right? NFL, they're gonna shove women's flag football down our throats for the next 10 years until the Olympics. It's gonna be horrible. All right. Anyway, any last thoughts here? We've been going for a good
No,
amount
I
of time.
think this was a lot of fun to have this conversation and be curious to see what kind of fallout happens afterwards.
Yeah, I mean, it's as I always say, the only thing I want is for what's best for the beach volleyball and beach volleyball players, and I have no stake and no interest. As Greg said, there's only three people that are going to make money, and I'm no longer one of those three. I just hope they all do. And if this gets on Sandcast, if it makes it, and you Sandcast audience, I hope you enjoyed this. I hope you got a little something out of it, and feel free to comment and tell us what you liked or what you didn't like or what you want to see more, and maybe we'll do some more of these. All right, Greg. Thank you. Have a good time in Oregon up there.
Thank you.